by our state statute. There will be additional opportunities to have your voice heard. Our next upcoming meeting will be Thursday, May 13th. That'll be 2 to 5 p.m. And that'll be the approved budget hearing. And in addition to those hearings, you can always give us online testimony at portlandoregon.gov/CBO. Or if you'd like, you can email testimony to budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. I have 2 statements I'm going to read as we begin our meeting. And the first is about electronic meetings. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of council are attending remotely by video and by teleconference. And the city has made several avenues available for the public to listen into the audio broadcast of this meeting. This meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, which is eGovPDX. Also available at portlandoregon.gov/video and on channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to council on the budget to the budget office website, portlandoregon.gov/CBO, and by email at budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and promote social distancing. This pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health and safety and welfare and requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. But thank you all for your patience, flexibility, and understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. Okay, next I'm going to read you a statement about our rules of conduct for this evening. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so that everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in this hearing, participants applied to give testimony online. If you did not apply and you'd like to give testimony to council, submit your testimony in writing to portlandoregon.gov/CBO. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Declare if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. You have 2 minutes to testify, and you'll be timed by staff, Zach Johnson. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up or interrupting others' testimony will not be allowed. And so if there are any disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being muted or ejected for the remainder of this electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. Thank you for making your fellow Portlanders feel welcome and comfortable, respected, and safe. Okay, next I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Wheeler, who will convene the City of Portland Budget Committee and take the roll.
Great, thank you so much, Jen. We appreciate it. Thank you everybody for being here this evening to provide your testimony. We appreciate it. We are now convened as the City of Portland Budget Committee. Keelan, good evening. Please call the roll.
Good evening. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. So as Jen indicated, we have a lot of people signed up to testify tonight. And the primary purpose of this meeting isn't to hear from us, it's to hear from you. So instead of taking the time to read my full budget message, I'm going to refer listeners to the City Budget Office website. That's portland.gov/CBO, or to the news tab on my website at portland.gov/Wheeler. My full message, as well as the entirety of the proposed budget, can be found on both of those sites. I encourage people to take a look at it. My proposal seeks to prioritize the council's stated shared goals, preserve essential community-facing services, and invest in a thoughtful realignment of our public safety services system in response to community input. I look forward to hearing more from each and every one of you tonight. Thank you for being here. And with that, we'll turn it over to our facilitator. Jen, you're up.
Thank you. So tonight we had 151 people sign up to testify this evening. The council wants to hear from everyone and has committed to stay beyond our original end time of 8 o'clock and for as long as needed. but we're unlikely to be able to retain our closed captioning beyond 8:30. And so we're trying to get some additional captioning, but if this is unsuccessful, we'll really need to conclude at 8:30, as providing captioning is a requirement of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if we're unable to hear from everyone, those who are not heard from will get priority to be heard at the Budget Committee's next convening, which is on May 13th at 2 p.m. So to further help ensure that we hear from as many people as possible, we're going to suggest the following. First, we ask that everyone try and stay on your allotted 2 minutes to ensure that everyone can be heard. A timekeeper will time the testimony, and when our timekeeper says 10 seconds, you'll have 10 seconds to conclude. So when our timekeeper says time at 2 minutes, please just promptly conclude your comments. You'll be given another warning at 2:10, and then if you continue to speak beyond 2 minutes and 20 seconds, then you'll be muted to allow for as much participation as possible. We have one other note. So if you're part of a group that signed up to emphasize your group message or testimony, one option to ensure that we get maximum participation tonight would be for you to emphasize your support for an earlier testimony, rather than just try and restate remarks. Although, again, you are welcome to restate earlier testimony if you prefer. We want to hear from as many people as possible. So thank you again for your time and your engagement tonight, and for your assistance in making this evening a welcoming environment for all people to participate. One note, if you are joining by phone, use *6 to mute and unmute. And I'm going to hand this over now to my colleague, Zach, who is our timekeeper.
Thanks, Jen. The first three people to testify tonight are Jules Bailey, Keith Jones, and Jean Chen. We will start with Jules.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. I am delighted to be with you. Thank you for making this so accessible. I'm Jules Bailey. I am chair of the board of the Portland Parks Foundation. And I want to thank you for a budget that makes a remarkable investment in Portland's future. I've always believed that the best budgets catalyze greater community action. This commission put in front of the voters a measure that the voters overwhelmingly approved to support Portland parks. Now, your budget, the one before you, makes an investment of $100,000 in leveraging additional private capital through the Portland Parks Foundation to be able to make the kinds of investments that we know Portlanders are excited about for their community. In particular, this $100,000 historically has been matched 8-to-1 by investments from the private sector. We are using this investment for operating dollars to allow us to be able to go out and raise money for specific projects and for specific initiatives, including ones to support friends groups and nurture friends groups, both traditional ones and new ones in communities that haven't had them yet, for DEI work and for fundraising for diverse individuals and leaders. And we're working with a group of BIPOC and social justice leaders on a community gathering known as a Paseo to help heal downtown, in addition to fundraising to help replace the elk statue and working across numerous bureaus to make that happen. But this is an opportunity for the city to help private dollars to be able to make these kinds of investments through the community. I also want to take just 1 minute in my hat as a board member of the Portland Business Alliance to thank you for the one-time investments in the money for citywide cleanup.
10 seconds.
And towards Portland's houseless crisis, as well as targeted public safety investments. These are one-time dollars that will, again, help catalyze greater community support so that Portland remains a livable, vibrant, and healthy city.
Thank you. Next, we have Keith.
Hello, my name is Keith Jones, and I am the Executive Director of Friends of Green Loop. For the past few years, I've been working with the displaced Alder Street food carts to create a new home on the Green Loop. Tonight, I'm here to talk to you about a small line item in the budget that will make a huge impact in Ankeny West. First, I want to take a moment to thank all the commissioners for your support and leadership on this project. All the bureaus and your staff are working together on this in a way I haven't seen before, and we are breaking through inter-bureau complications that have plagued us in the past. They are all working together as a team to help get Ankeny West up and running this summer. This is a testament to all of you and the direction you've set. And I want to recognize what you've brought to this council. So thank you. Second, I'd like to thank Mayor Wheeler for including the cost of the infrastructure in your proposed budget. Wow, this has been a major hurdle in getting this project up and running, and if passed, would offer huge relief to us. We already have a challenging uphill climb ahead with the impact that the pandemic has had on our economy and travel and tourism. These funds will provide a huge jumpstart towards success. This line item is an investment that will immediately pay off. These carts will create jobs, help to restore much needed activity in the downtown core, and make improvements to a long neglected park. In the long term, the project can provide a place for us to reseed our independent restaurant community that's taken a devastating hit during the pandemic. Food carts provide an opportunity where people can start businesses without a substantial investment, be creative, build something, and have the whole world come to visit. Ankeny West will be a signature moment on the Green Loop. We want to create a place that people will love and that Portlanders will be proud of. We are grateful for this show of confidence from you and urge you to adopt this line item in the budget. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have Jean.
Good evening, Mayor Wheeler and the City Council. For the record, my name is Jean Chen, and today I am speaking on behalf of my father, King Chen, as he knows very minimal English. King is the owner of Huali House, a small business selling Chinese and Thai food that was part of the Alder Street food cart pod for about 2 years before we got displaced. My dad has been a cook for over 20 years now, and being able to share his food and culture with the community through his own business has always been his dream. And his favorite thing to do is to draft up new recipes for his customers to try. And that's why when we got displaced, it was an uproot not only to our and others' only sources of income, but also an uproot to his passions and goals. And so we got displaced in June 2019, and we were told that we would be up and running again, at least by the end of that year. But time and time again, we have been disappointed. And it has been very scary to wait throughout these 2 years, especially with the rise of COVID-19, because it has been more difficult than ever to find a job to keep our family afloat. And so we have been waiting for the Ankeny West project to be completed for a very long time now, but we cannot do it without your help. That is why today we are asking that you support us by voting yes to funding to go towards providing electricity for the Ankeny West project so that Huali House family and the rest of the Alder Pod families can continue to spread food and cheer for our tourists, home residents, and our greater Portland community. Thank you for your time and consideration in helping move this forward.
Thank you. The next 3 people to testify will be Mahmoud, Noe Uribe Mendoza, and Vadim Mazursky. We'll start with Mahmoud.
Good evening. This is Mahmoud Zurek, the owner of the Kafta House for about 8 years. The last 2 years was very hard for us, jumping between jobs, trying to stay afloat, sustain me and my family. I would love for you guys vote for the Ankeny West project to keep Portland going and the diversity of the food industry and little small businesses afloat, and to keep so many foods, different foods in one little pod. That's great, and I don't think there's any other place in the U.S. that has that diversity. So I encourage you to vote for the Ankeny West project, and thank you very much for all your support and help.
Thank you. Next we have Noy.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Noe. I'm here with my son Noe Jr. And we the owner of the Angel Taqueria. We was located in an Alder Pod. And for the last 2 years for a family, that be really tough, that be really hard to move forward. And this bill definitely, is gonna pass, is gonna change our life. This is pretty much a future for my son, my daughter, which is only 3 years. And we only ask you is like one more chance, one more opportunity to continue to show the diversity in Portland, a culture, and just the go back to work. It'll be really tough. I passed almost 1 year to find a job, and because we put pretty much everything in this food cart, and when we had to move it out and had no place to go, and the pandemic is just like nightmare. And we just we'd like to thank everybody who support this, especially Mayor Wheeler, and that's pretty much. Thank you, everybody who support this.
Thank you. Next, we have Vadim. Looks like Vadim is not in the meeting. So the next three people to testify will be Mary Rubble, Javs, and Jana Testman. We will start with Mary.
Good evening. This is Mary Rubel with the Portland Parks Foundation. I simply want to reiterate what Jules Bailey had to say to all of you. We are very thankful that you have included us in the budget, Mr. Mayor, and all the commissioners. We hope that you will continue to support the Portland Parks Foundation. In addition to some of the things that Jules pointed out, I want to note that our work on the levy last year made a huge difference for the Bureau in terms of funding for ongoing operations. We hope to continue to work with the Bureau on capital projects, which is a key area that we've had success in the past. Your support allows us to be able to do that because it underwrites some of the operating expenses of the foundation so that we can focus on programming. In addition, we're doing some important pieces here in Portland, such as the City of Gardens proclamation and booklet to help people really understand the value that the gardens and all of our beautiful parks add to the city of Portland. We are looking at a leadership grant program that will be new. We have a major donor who is very interested in supporting that, and we'll be looking for additional funding for a leadership program for nonprofit organizations and friends groups, especially new and emerging leaders. So in conclusion, I simply want to say thank you. We hope you will continue to keep us in the budget, and we will continue to support the city as we have in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Javs.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Cool. So I think there's a lot of good in this budget. I really urge you folks to expedite the Opening Food Cart project because this should not have taken 2 years. If it was something the Pearl District or the South Waterfront wanted, it would have gotten done the very next month. But here we are 2 years later, these folks are still struggling. We all know how Portland rolls. All I know is that I speak for so many others when I say that we're pretty tired of this backroom deal, shadow government stuff that a lot of folks continue to engage in. Looking at you, Ted. It's not democracy for you to pretend to listen to us once a month while the business improvement districts have you guys on speed dial and pay for their own cops and prosecutors. It's not democracy for a few rich parasite landlords and business associations to be able to buy their preferred policies while the rest of us get screwed. That's called corruption. The people of Portland voted for campaign finance reform, for extensive police reform, but like Ted says, nah, I'm good. I'm just gonna buy this like everything else in my life. And then you create a job out of thin air for a disgraced former mayor who couldn't even win his own election. So now the taxpayers are paying him to exist anyway. And then on top of that, not a single cop or Fed has been held accountable for what happened last summer. And then the city lets the feds go on an $11 million fine. Like what? I thought we had a budget shortfall. Why are we just giving money away? There's also like the wrist slap that the Business Association in the Pearl District got for 25 individual counts of blatant corruption. Like what? Why are we just letting this money go away? Is taking money from rich people only okay when it's going towards your campaign? Or, what's the standard here? How are people supposed to have any faith in this process of democracy when the candidate who had more people vote against him than for him gets to unilaterally decide policy based on the financial interests of his donors?
10 seconds.
Like these policies are literally getting people killed. Do what your constituents are telling you. Your job is not to have an opinion. Your job is to do what people are asking for you to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jana.
Thank you, commissioners. Please fund all 6 teams negotiated and as previously budgeted for the Portland street response so that it might have as constant and broad of coverage as possible. We need to lighten the load of the police by diverting calls in regards to those living outside, especially those in crises. The police are trained in huge proportion. The latest shooter having 300 hours of training in weapons and 1 in answering mental health calls. And he allegedly read a book on de-escalation. Anyone answering these critical calls should be paid a living wage when contracted, but ideally these calls should be answered by the Portland Street Response as their own full bureau of unionized workers. And these calls must be the start of services that don't criminalize, but rather meet the needs of those experiencing houselessness, stable, secure, varied, long-term housing, prevention by compelling landlords to utilize the landlord compensation fund where the state pays 80% to the landlord, who then forgives the other 20%. They're not utilizing it. We need to put millions towards reparations, which could go so much further in bringing about greater equity than graffiti cleanup. In the meantime, before we fix the police commissioner, like the overlap thing where I appreciate that the start of a more hands-on approach to police accountability, as they've demonstrated that they're not going to be doing that themselves. And with the remainder of my time, I just want to add on that 43% of members of the PBA, actually, I'm not sure about the actual number, it's a minority, similar to the minority that voted in Ted. They don't even have an address in this city. So, like, why do they have so much power right now? It's not fair. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next 3 people to testify will be Matthew Miller, Dylan Grantham, and Bridget Mcgrath. We will start with Matthew. Looks like Matthew is no longer in the meeting. Moving on to Dylan. Who also does not appear to be in the meeting. And then moving on to Bridget. Are you there, Bridget?
To unmute. Oh, there. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, great. Thanks. Good evening. Thank you for taking some time. I'm a teacher here in Portland, and I want to first comment that releasing a budget that is more than 300 pages and having comments due on Wednesday is just not enough time. I've written 300-page documents. I don't know how you expect any citizen to get through this, but I have a few quick takeaways. First of all, fully funding the Portland Street Response pilot is not enough. It needs to be expanded. Obviously, we need to cut the budget from Portland Police and reinvest it into community solutions, because brutalizing public citizens is not what I want my tax dollars going towards. With almost $1 million, I'm honestly shocked. You think you can only afford to hire 4 professionals. You can double that, triple that easily. I would imagine, seeing the mutual aid response of this city in the last year, there were people who would volunteer, professionals who have mental health experience who would volunteer to go help out. In fact, mutual aid groups are already doing that. So, get with it, or we're going to make their job mute. Also, there's 0 for community solar. I'm not sure why that's even a line item if there is literally 0 money there. Climate change is real. I left California after watching a lake dry up. So if this community is not investing in sustainable power, we know that this is already going to be chaos with the fires that happened last fall. So get that together. We need sustainable energy. Finally, debt service. That was a shocking number to me. I think it's table 1 on page 39. Anywhere from $614 to $944 million for debt service. That's lining the pockets of bankers. Any basic budget, personal budget person knows, whether it's, your personal home budget, children, whatever values you're teaching people about money management.
10 seconds.
You need to pay that off before borrowing more money and paying more. So that's a significant portion of the budget that needs to be just fiscally better managed from a conservative standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next 3 speakers will be Rebecca Saunders, Anna, and Vania Lucia Mancia. We will start with Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm graduating in June with my Master of Social Work from Portland State University, and I'm currently interning as an individual and group therapist with folks who are fleeing and or experiencing domestic violence and or intimate partner abuse. My agency is desperately underfunded and understaffed. We're not capable of providing all the services that are needed. Many of my sessions focus on trying to connect folks to what limited resources might be available and hold space to process the devastating impacts of not having access to resources. We need to pour our funds into reparations, mental health care, affordable housing, childcare, education prevention, legal representation for survivors, and so many other resources, just to name a few things. We need to fund the Portland Street Response, which I would volunteer for happily, which this proposed budget is slashing funding for by 77%. The proposed budget suggests over $5 million towards accelerated hiring of 30 police officers, over $1.8 million towards expanding the community service officer program, and over $790,000 towards funding positions in the police bureau. We do not need funding going towards the police, who at their core murder, harm, and traumatize members of communities they are not even part of. Portland police have murdered many individuals, such as Patrick Kimmons, Robert Delgado, Andre Glodden, Tyrell Kyreem Johnson, Samuel Rice, Quanice, Derek Hayes, Kendra James, who was murdered today in 2003 by the Portland police, Willie Thomas Grigsby, Byron Hammock, which are only a few of the human beings in our communities murdered by the Portland police. It is absolutely crucial to divest from the Portland Police Bureau and invest our money into providing resources to communities, people, mothers, individuals, children who so desperately need them instead. I can't begin to imagine the impact that even a fraction of these funds that are going to the Portland Police, if any of my clients had access, I can't even begin to imagine how many lives could be changed. It's long past time to reallocate our funds into reparations and resources for communities who need them, rather into the oppressive, racist, and violent law enforcement system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Anna.
Hi, good evening. My name is Anna. Community members asked each other this week if there's any value in contributing testimony tonight, if there's value in sharing our voices when it's clear that the Portland Business Alliance's influence over the mayor's office is truly the most important voice at the table, after the mayor has expressed that his own opinion is of the greatest value, while also admitting that his role as the mayor and the police commissioner is a conflict of interest. If we are truly to believe that this body is to treat this budget as a moral document, it began with some very dubious roots. Despite all of that, you found yourself so far tonight and will continue for the next few hours listening to the voices and experiences of the most engaged Portlanders, asking you to prioritize public safety over the business interests of the PBA and protecting PPB. I'll keep my comments short. Not only fully funding, but expanding the Portland Street Response so we can eliminate violent and inept police officers from sensitive interactions with Portlanders is of the utmost importance. Anything short of an expansion of this program is an indication that this body did not listen to our voices. They did not care that our bodies were harmed in the streets over the last year, nor do they have interest in prioritizing Portland's vitality and safety in this city above business interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Vania.
Good evening. My name is Vania Lucia Mancia, and I am a North Portland resident and community organizer at Unite Oregon. As a guest on this Indigenous land, I am here today to demand that $53 million be removed from the Portland Police Bureau budget and be redirected to community programs and opportunities that redefine the meaning of community safety. Our BIPOC, immigrant, refugee, and low-income communities are in need of resources that truly address their needs and that showcase that their lives matter. Due to the nature of their job, the police do not truly prevent crime. They are called when an incident is in process or after something has already happened. As a result, many of the most pressing issues in our community will not be considered addressed or solved until the city chooses to invest in solutions that will tackle the root of the problem. I ask that you listen to the demands of the community, many of which are speaking here today, and most importantly, to the demands of Black folks. The police does not need the amount of funding that it has when people are literally on the streets dying. Please cut those 53 million if you truly care about the communities that we serve and that live in your city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Angie Tomlinson, Jasmine Casanova Dean, and Alicia Lauer. We will start with Angie.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. Thank you to the mayor and the commissioners to hearing my testimony. I work for BDS as the electronic plan review manager, working on implementation of Project Docs database that has allowed for development plan reviewers remotely to plan review remotely with great transparency. The digital plan review has been used on many large projects in the last few years, including many inclusionary housing projects with great success. We also created a way for development applicants and reviewers to work remotely within weeks of the stay-at-home order last spring, which was a great success. But after the dust settled from the commotion of working remotely, I did take a breath and step back to examine our work and process and realize that our progress could be increasing the digital divide to our underserved populations. And as such, I come to you as a citizen, as someone that grew up in inclusionary housing, raised by a single mom. I take these situations very seriously. Through research, I became familiar with the Office of Community Technology and the work on digital equity that they're doing. And I would like to show my strong support for their proposed budget for the OTC, which includes an ongoing digital inclusion fund of $500,000 annually to help provide sustainability and innovation grants to frontline organizations and matching dollars for anticipated digital inclusion grants from the state and federal government or foundations, a full-time community board broadband planner to increase the bandwidth of the office to plan for infrastructure investments and identify and apply for grants to meet the infrastructure and affordability needs of our residents, and $150,000 for a cybersecurity and data protection training pilot to train vulnerable residents, particularly BIPOC, people with disabilities, older adults, and English language learners, how to spot scams and phishing attempts and protect themselves. Thank you for supporting underserving communities and supporting digital equity.
Thank you. Next, we have Jasmine.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, hello. My name is Jasmine Casanova Dean, and I am the Black Lives Matter organizer at Unite Oregon. And I am here to demand that the City Council defund $35 million from the police and redirect it into the community. As in fall and spring and summer of last year, we have continued to shout the defunding of police. The idea that most do not feel safe by those who are to protect us. The idea that some people on this council would run on that notion of defunding the police and then fail to do so is appalling. The fact that just a couple weeks ago, the Portland City Police murdered a man in Lentz Park is appalling. The fact that we still constantly have police around the world and nation murdering Black people and brown people in the street, children, is appalling. The fact that this budget only required a 1% decrease while other businesses and entities are getting 5% is appalling. We need to defund the police. We need to reinvest into the community. Unite Oregon put out a 9-page document explicitly saying where this money could go to, how much of this money could go there. I urge you all to read it and really consider, are the police keeping us safe, or are they merely just keeping us barely alive? We're barely alive. People are terrified. People don't even call the police for emergency situations anymore because when they do, people get shot. The people who call them get shot. This needs to end. This has been a notion. What more do we need to do? There are 45 people on this call, some of which who are calling for that defunding. We were marching in the streets. We have been. There was a 100-day protest last summer. What more do we need to do in order for you all to listen and to stand up for what is right? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Alicia.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Hello, Mayor, Commissioner, and neighbors. I am the daughter of a Portland police officer, a former staffer for Mayor Sam Adams, and I've worked in New York City, Bill de Blasio's Office of Criminal Justice, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. I'm a homeowner in inner Southeast Portland, and I'm a landlord. And I say all of these things because my opinions on defunding police and investing in communities, often then people want to paint me as, an anarchist or a crazy, I don't like that word, but a crazy liberal or radical. But I'm a human who has a lot of different perspectives on these issues. And so I think that my neighbors and the beautiful, wonderful anarchists and community builders on this call have done a really great job of pleading with you, the person who spoke before me, what more can we do, right? I mean, it's very obvious that community continues to be silenced. I do want to thank Commissioner Rubio for her leadership on the City Council to invest in community-based approaches to gun violence prevention, which work and are effective, and are far more effective than policing alone. And police even agree that we need to invest resources equally in community-based approaches. That is the only way that we're going to build a more resilient economy, build a more vibrant community that includes everyone and not just white people in Portland. And I'm a white person, and I know that white supremacy hurts me too. It hurts everyone, but mostly it hurts my non-white neighbors, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing the people that I have worked for and that I have supported silencing these people and not respecting their demands. And every time you say clean up Portland, I hear you say that you're referring to people as litter. So stop saying clean up Portland when what you're really doing is sweeping people away and not taking care of Portland. Why don't you take care of Portland instead? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three people to give testimony will be Frida Christopher, Isaac Mclennan, and Aaron Waters. We will start with Frida.
I'm assuming you can hear me. Okay, good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Frida Christopher. I'm co-chair of the EPAP Housing Subcommittee and a member of the David Douglas School Board. We are requesting that you reconsider the $114,200 cut in the PHB budget for the East Portland Grants pilot program. The city has stated they are concerned about the gentrification and involuntary displacement in East Portland. Yet EPAP, as an organization representing many East Portland residents, we have seen few actions to deal with the involuntary displacement that is currently happening. And again, funds for this efforts are being cut in the city budget. I have spoken to council before that our school districts are a barometer to what is happening in the community. As the inner city gentrified and lower income residents were displaced, PPS saw a declining enrollment over many years. Now the city is trying to bring those displaced residents back at a very high cost. For the past 5 years, David Douglas School District, which comprises most of East Portland, has experienced a declining enrollment and a decline in the percentage of students on free and reduced lunch. This is early signs of families being displaced, only now they are being pushed out of Portland altogether. Now this year, as a school board member, we receive a report on students that moved mid-year, but are finishing the year at David Douglas Schools. Normally we have around 120 to 150 students move. This year there has been a 250% increase over last year of mid-year moves. When drilling down on the demographics, our BIPOC and immigrant students were moving out at a greater rate than our white students. These same demographic groups were more likely to be living in poverty. We believe this is hardly the time to be cutting resources budgeted to prevent involuntary displacement of BIPOC communities from East Portland. We ask you to fully fund the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Isaac.
Hello there, can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Hello, Mayor Wheeler and other City Council members attending today. My name is Isaac Mclennan, Vice President, Portland Firefighters Association, Local 43. Mayor Wheeler's decision to fund firefighters shows that he is keeping his commitment to public safety, which means citizens will not have to worry about neighborhood fire stations closing, response times to emergency calls taking longer, and it also means that Mayor Wheeler cares about the well-being of hardworking Portland firefighters. Funding the Fire Bureau will help staffing remain consistent at all fire stations, even though our members, frontline firefighters, have been doing more with less cuts since the cuts to staffing in 2013. Permanent funding the mayor is proposing also gives all firefighters across Portland a lifeline until more staffing can be added, which will catch up to the growing city population, help reduce response times, and ensure the people of our community who need our help will get the help that they need in time. We know the cuts to rapid response vehicles, known as RRVs, are slated to be closed out by 2023 and 24. This is a huge concern for us. We hope the mayor and city council members will allow us time to revisit the importance of RRVs before final cuts are made in the coming years. Funding to the Fire Bureau during a difficult year speaks to the mayor's promise to keep the community safe and keep community safety a priority to the people of Portland and all the communities we serve every day. As a veteran firefighter for over 20 years, I know funding neighborhood fire stations to stay open will mean life or death in situations like a house fire or a car crash where seconds count. Myself and all of the Local 43 members will continue to support our leaders when they support a fire budget that also allows us to put people's safety first. Please join the mayor, vote yes on his recommendations to approve this budget recommendations and fund firefighters in our neighborhood fire stations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Aaron.
All right, can everyone hear me?
We can.
Hi there. Good evening. My name is Erin Waters, she, her pronouns. I'm a Black transgender woman with some concerns, and I appreciate this open forum. On Trans Day Visibility several weeks ago, marginalized people in the city reminded you that we need more than platitudes, proclamations, well wishes, or half-baked plans, more than a few dollars worth of emergency funds to keep us alive long enough to get you to your next PR announcement about how you're saving us. We appreciate the $250,000 light item. Please vote yes on this. But I want to remind the city that after decades of neglect, this is a start, and it isn't even close to what the county has committed over 3 years, which is $750,000. The city needs to consciously move away from the things keeping all of our citizens trapped in cycles of poverty, fighting over the same small pots of money that others in the same system will never be contained by. We see for whom budget constraints are always a problem. We see who get paltry sums while others in the same system continuously thrive. We see who you seem to have endless ways of shifting around money for through task forces and response teams. Learned helplessness and patterns of impotence only define the city's response when it comes to certain people and certain communities. We fear you see us as more demographic than as people. In a capitalist system, reality is putting your money where your mouth is. Thank you for that. But this is a chance to decide who matters more in the city, because you're either funding the people or you're making excuses to protect discriminatory systems holding those people down. Please turn your attention to how you can fund all of us. Then do what you need to do to get out of the way so we can define our own future outside of the clutches of predator classes who ally themselves closer to a $1 bill than they ever would to somebody sleeping under the Burnside Bridge tonight. Thank you very much.
I just want to jump in really quick to make a brief announcement in our meeting. I wanted to let you know that we have just received news that our captioner is able to stay until 9:30. And so we're really thankful for our vendors for saying that they would have this additional time, and council for being willing to stay late. We want to make sure that we're hearing as much testimony as possible. So I want to make sure that the folks on this call know that they should stay on the line, as we're likely to have a little bit more time at the end of this meeting. So thank you for our folks who are doing closed captioning.
Thanks, Jen. The next three people to testify will be Danny Chan, Tawasi, and Leslie Smith. We will start with Danny.
Hello, can you hear me, guys?
We can.
Hi, my name is Danny Chan. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. We are one of the pods that were on Alder Street, and we were just trying to thank everybody for all the support, trying to keep us together. There was 40 food carts down there when I was there before we left. That's about 40 food carts, 80 families, rough guess. That's a lot of business and a lot of families to be supporting. So I really thank you guys. If you guys can help us with that and start something, downtown really needs it. We really need it. And I just want to thank you guys for the support and everything you guys have done for us. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tawasi.
Hey there, this is Tawasi. I wanted to start out by acknowledging that the land where we live here in Portland is land where Indigenous people once lived, and the displaced people who were also dispossessed of this beautiful place currently suffer a water crisis in Warm Springs. Now, as good neighbors, it behooves us as the population center of the state to take care of people who live in more rural areas, especially the people who we benefit from their displacement. Now, that's as an aside from my reason for coming on today. I wanted to talk about the houselessness crisis that we face here in Portland, because by some estimates, there are upward of 40,000 people who go to sleep unhoused in the city each night. 40,000 is a lot of people, and in order to address that, it takes a huge amount of effort, way more than, say, the Portland police could manage, even if arresting people could somehow stop them from being unhoused, which it doesn't. We all know that nearly half of all arrests are of unhoused people, yet Portland police do not reform people by arresting them. All they do is incarcerate people, and a lot of time leave them to die. Who knows how many were left to die by the medical examiner when the medical examiner marked it down as a death of natural causes. All of that said, I just want to mention Eleanor Roosevelt, who foresaw this time coming, and along with the United Nations, drafted a document to help preserve people's lives. This is in the aftermath of an actual genocide and Holocaust, which was put on people like my ancestors who are of Jewish descent and died so that we could have this document. And in the document, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we have Article 9. It says, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile, which is what happens in city parks. Also, Article 17, just Article 17 real quick. It says, everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property. Rapid response BioClean. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Leslie.
Hello. All right, my name is Leslie Smith. I've lived in Northeast Portland since 1989. I'm commenting because I strongly oppose cutting the police force. In fact, I think it should be increased. And here are some of the reasons why. On April 16th at 7:40 a.m., my husband and I witnessed a drive-by shooting on Northeast Morris Street in MLK. We're walking from our house to Irvington. We crossed MLK at the light, and about 20 yards from the corner, a white late model car was parked. The driver was just sitting there idling. We got about 20 yards past that car, and 8 to 10 gunshots rang out behind us. I just really want you to understand that if my husband and I had been 20 seconds later, we may have been injured or killed. The problem for me is this is just an example of what's going in our street. I live on Ivy Street. There are drug dealers and their customers are openly parking in the street while they make their transactions. They are not my neighbors. They drive into this street to conduct their business. Vandalism is rampant. There's prostitution, drug deals, smoking crack on our neighbors' front porches with children present, and stolen cars. Gunshots are becoming a common occurrence. Loud fights break out. The police are so completely understaffed right now that they can't respond to anything but the most immediately dangerous crimes. The notion that a counselor or a park ranger will be present on our street from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and will be capable of dealing with these violent events is just too ridiculous for words. Only qualified and trained police can do that. Myself and my neighbors deserve to be safe on our streets.
10 seconds.
Does my life matter? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. The next three people to give testimony will be Parker Lee, Derek Collier, and Mickey Gillette. We will start with Parker.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Thank you. Members of City Council, Mayor Wheeler, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Parker Lee. I'm board chair of the Regional Arts and Cultural Council, which is an independent nonprofit organization serving Greater Portland. I'm also the founder and managing partner of the design consultancy firm Territory. The Regional Arts and Culture Council works on behalf of the creative community to uplift the important role arts and culture play in Oregon's economy and our quality of life. Our creative community is Portland's unique advantage, and your investments in artists and arts orgs will help Portlanders heal and recover from this year of grief and trauma. Artists are our second responders in the COVID crisis, coming to our aid with creativity, empathy, and joy. Artists are also an important economic driver for the city. Arts and culture is one of the largest sectors in Oregon's economy, bigger than agriculture and forestry or education services. It's estimated that the total economic impact of the arts in Oregon is $687 million. This includes nearly 12,000 related businesses, 1,400 nonprofit organizations. Pre-pandemic, the arts employed nearly 50,000 people in Oregon. The economic and financial impacts of COVID-19 on our sector have been massive. 94% of arts orgs and artists reported having to cancel events. 70% report the crisis is having a severe impact, and 83% have had to implement layoffs and furloughs. Through July 2020, creative workers made up 64% of the Oregon unemployment population, over 43,000 people. Together with our partners, RAC secured relief funding for the arts at the state, local, and federal level, and raised new funds from individuals and foundations. We multiply what city budgets with public and private funding, and we advance the city's commitment to equity through intentional investments and partnerships. With your continued financial support and by advocating together, we can ensure Portland's recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Derek.
There, can you hear me now?
We can.
Perfect. Mayor Wheeler and commissioners, I appreciate you giving the community an opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Derek Collier, and as we are limited to 2 minutes only, I'm going to focus on the two biggest areas of opportunity that I see in reviewing this proposed budget, and I'm going to talk quickly. First, shelter programs and other temporary interventions cost taxpayers more than $35,000 per person helped. In contrast, the wraparound services that supportive housing programs offer cost less than $13,000 per person. The money being spent on houselessness in our city is nothing more than a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging wound. It is disheartening to see the city continue to invest money in programs that do not provide lasting, meaningful benefit to our houseless neighbors. The budget as proposed attempts to mitigate the harmful effects of houselessness on Portlanders without responding to the cause of it. The second thing I want to talk about is the still bloated Portland Police Bureau budget. I applaud efforts since protests started last year to remove funding from the PPB and reallocate it to programs of community safety that are both evidence-based and that do not cause more harm to already marginalized communities. However, the facts of the PPB's history and present of abuses and mismanagement maintain to this day. When I first moved to Portland from Salem 2 decades ago, the PPB was being rightfully crucified for their utterly incompetent and inappropriate response to protests. As we saw last year, nothing substantial has changed in the intervening 20 years. The time for incrementalism in reimagining community safety has come and gone, and it is well past time for bold investitures in alternate solutions. A greater investment in Portland street response is an amazing start, but it is unacceptable that so much money is being kept from other solutions that we know stop crime before it happens in favor of capitulating to a group of puffed up bullies that respond to crime only after it's been committed. Community safety is secure housing, anti-hunger initiatives, and healthcare for every Portlander. More than ever before, the challenge facing the offices of the mayor and city council is to make choices that help Portland be better than we have ever been before. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mickey.
Hi, can people hear me?
We can.
Oh, great, thank you. Hello, Mayor Wheeler and council members. My name is Mickey Gillette. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Major Gifts Officer at Basic Rights Oregon. I'm testifying today in support of the $250,000 to be devoted to trans-specific homeless services in the proposed budget. As a transgender woman, I'm all too aware of why these services are needed by the trans community. The most recent US Trans Survey found that trans people experienced unemployment at 3 times the rate of their non-trans peers. 29% of the respondents reported living in poverty. 23% had experienced housing discrimination within the previous year. And 30% had experienced homelessness in their lifetimes. That's nearly 1 in 3. Among homeless trans people, 70% reported having been harassed, assaulted, or kicked out of a shelter where they'd sought a bed because they were trans. And 26%, more than 1 in 4, avoided accessing a shelter altogether because they feared mistreatment or discrimination. These proposed funds can help trans people experiencing homelessness find safety, community, and dignity, as opposed to a continuation of the social rejection that's all too common for trans people in today's society. I hope you'll approve this budget measure and help some of the most vulnerable Portlanders find a safe place in their hardest moments. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 3 people to testify will be Liz Smith, Bridget Blackburn, and Joy Church. We will start with Liz.
Good evening, Mayor Wheeler and council members. This is Liz Smith. I am the president of the St. John's Boosters Business Association and board president of Venture Portland. And as St. John's is an active participant in the Catalytic Investment Initiative in an underserved district, I have firsthand experience and know how valuable this program is and Venture Portland to districts and small business owners. With that, I wanted to say that I support the one-time funding for Venture Portland to support neighborhood business districts. Neighborhood business districts are vital to Portland's economy, and these funds will assist them in difficult times. I would like to ask the City Council support the proposed $700,000 for minority chambers of commerce to increase their capacity also. And I just wanted to keep it brief and say thank you for having us testify here tonight and for your proposed budget.
Thank you. Next, we have Bridget.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Bridget Blackburn, and I co-own a small independent business in Portland's Central East Side. My business is Cargo, and we've been in business for 25 years, and never in our existence have we seen so many personal challenges for us and for our city here in Portland. We know that to grow stronger together coming out of this time, we need the support of organizations like Venture Portland and our business district associations. I strongly support the one-time funding of $5,301 to support business district associations. I'd like to stress that not only does Venture Portland offer essential tools to districts such as education, organizing, and resources, but through grants, Venture also helps to keep districts share the information freely. This brings all of Portland's unique business districts together, which makes Portland unique and strong. And that's what will make us pull through this time. if we can continue to lace together not only what our core business districts know and share, but reach out to those CII, the outlying areas, the districts that really need the assistance, we can leverage that knowledge. We can help the city fill the holes where you're unable to reach all of the needs that we've got. It's not only are we looking at, the actual physical needs that the district has, but the emotional and the logistical needs that the city has moving forward. We have to come through this stronger together, and Venture will help us to do that. I strongly support continuing to fund Venture in this one-time initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Joy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joy Church, and I am honored to be the Executive Director of Venture Portland. Thank you to City Council for hearing and considering the proposed one-time allocation of $530,000 to further support our small businesses through our business district associations. This is a great network of volunteer people who are small business owners who volunteer their times to sit on their associations in support of all the incredible efforts of their business districts. I speak on behalf of many small business owners who could not sign up to testify this evening because they are running their stores. So we are doing a letter writing campaign as well. Anyway, we all know that Portland's uniqueness and attraction is due to our small businesses. The Alberta Street Fair, the Hawthorne Street Fair, these are front-facing things that happen every year outside of pandemic times that we greatly value and rely on to make Portland appear and seem and be unique, not only for Portlanders, but for visitors from all over the country and all over the world. We don't have a Space Needle or a Golden Gate Bridge. What we have is our unique small businesses and those districts. To that end, we are excited that you are considering us for a one-time creation of an events team. This events hub would be a one-stop shop for business districts to create and implement their special events through Venture Portland. I know from thankfully being on the events action table that events are a truly beloved mainstay of Portland. We would be honored to support events throughout our city through an events hub. Another part of our recommendation is to increase the hours that our organizers are currently provided. So we have organizers through the Catalytic Investment Initiative, thanks to Prosper Portland and thanks to you. Those organizers in underserved areas that are only at 12 hours a week, 36 hours would be enormous for them to support those districts. And we also want to say we are in major favor of support to BIPOC chambers here in the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Kaya Sand, Sean Jacobson, and Taylor Stone. We will start with Kaya.
Mayor Wheeler, commissioners, I'm Kaya Sand, and as Executive Director of Street Roots, I'm focused on how our city can create a non-police first responder system for people in crisis. I'm disappointed in the initial budget that only expands the Portland Street Response Lens pilot during this fiscal year. Committing to the full $4.2 million to expand the pilot citywide is your opportunity to commit to a policy of hope. I'm not overstating when I say the whole nation is watching. Because of Street Roots' work on this, I've been fortunate to be part of national conversations with cities, reporters, universities, and think tanks. If you vote to stunt this program's ambition, there will be a spotlight on that timidity. Working among people experiencing homelessness, I witnessed policy predicated on piecemeal destruction that gnaws at people on the streets who are wrapped in trauma. All that suffering and also raw warmth and expressiveness in the streets needs to be matched by a first responder system dedicated to meeting people where they are at, so life can get better or at least not get worse. Today, Street Roots vendors stood on the Old Town sidewalk discussing their worries that this budget signals City Council is abandoning its commitment to Portland Street Response. One woman demonstrated how she brings calm to a crisis crisis, and we could all feel that calm. De-escalation is almost a language of love at Street Roots. It's a deep knowledge of how to relate to each other and the importance of extending calm to people, which Portland Street Response gives us the opportunity to do citywide. The development of this program is a thoughtful process. Whitebird Clinic Cahoots already issued a supportive report of the initial pilot design, the simultaneous evaluation process, which I'm proud our Street Roots ambassadors who've experienced homelessness will help with, is designed to strengthen and scale up Portland Street Response. We've got what we need to do this, and I'm cautiously optimistic that you, as our city council, will seize this historic opportunity, signaling your ambition for a healthier city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sean.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
I just want to start by thanking you for listening to me and everybody else that's been speaking here. It's very important that elected officials listen to their constituents. So I'm here as a representative of both the Vanport Initiative and Sunrise PDX, but I'm just going to speak from my heart about my personal experience. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I went to Portland Public Schools. I was educated at Portland State University. I was educated in the interdisciplinary social sciences and anthropology, and I'm currently a permaculture practitioner. I really today want to talk about the Portland Street Response Program and how important it is that that program is expanded. The current science understands that the kind of behavior that police officers are trained to engage citizens with is not going to lead to resolution. It's not going to de-escalate, and it's not going to solve problems. I understand that the kinds of solutions that we're going to need, like other people have talked about already, are very broad economic solutions. Most people that are criminalized have experienced lifetimes of trauma that need to be addressed and that should be acknowledged when you are interacting with them. Only a program like Street Response is going to be able to train people to do that. I know now Portland Street Response and park rangers might not be able to deal with certain kinds of situations, but if you fund them, they will be able to. I don't know a single person that I have talked to that in this city, most of the people that I've grown up with here, that do not want to see something like a community peacekeeping operation in this city that rivals the Portland Police Department. Everyone that I know wants something like that.
10 seconds.
Okay. I'll end it there. I sincerely hope that all of you take this to heart and listen to the people that have spoken tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Taylor.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi there. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I know it's been going to be a very long evening for everyone, so I'll try to be brief. I'm coming to you as a 10-plus year Portland resident. I'm also here as part of a local community organizing group called JUICE, who aims to cultivate lasting solutions that uphold the pillars of justice, unity, integrity, community, and equality. And so some of my feedback is that first, instead of funding additional police officers, including the PS3s, those funds should be used to expand the capacity of the Portland Street Response Team. We all know that the majority of calls the police are responding to are calls that are more appropriate for non-police response, such as mental and emotional crises, houselessness issues, and others. Portland Street Response is much more capable and relevant to that kind of work and will be a huge support to PBB without needing to add additional police on the ground. Also, there's currently over $3 million in the budget allocated for graffiti cleanup, and this should be amended. In the grander scheme of things, graffiti is a low priority issue, and that money can be better spent elsewhere. The city needs to work closely with the Portland Street Art Alliance and other community groups that have relationships with street art community to identify ways to create policy that supports street art instead of criminalizes it. Thirdly, as for allocating money to the city's Office of the Inspector General, the city should not be utilizing resources, bureaus, offices, or any others to assess the use of force claims due to a conflict of interest. I support the allocation of funds to expand resources to evaluate use of force by officers. However, This work should be done in coordination with the State Attorney General's office or another third party that is not directly related to the city or the PPP or PPA.
10 seconds.
It's in my experience that that the police need to be held accountable, and they have yet to do so. And until they're going to do that, we need to hold them accountable and not provide them with any sort of budget. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 3 people to testify will be Casey Lewis, Annie Capistani, and Jenny Boyce. We will start with Casey.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Members of City Council, my name is Casey Lewis. I'm the managing attorney for the Mental Health Rights Project with Disability Rights Oregon. I'm here today to express our concerns about the proposed budget, and specifically the decision not to fund any expansion of the Portland Street Response Program. Last time I testified to this council was the day after the Portland police killed Robert Delgado, a homeless man who struggled with mental illness, in broad daylight in a public park. In that testimony, I tried to express to you the urgency of acting to expand the availability of crisis support services in Portland so that no more families would have to experience the grief of losing a family member in crisis to police violence. This budget does not reflect that urgency. Instead, it maintains the status quo, insisting that it is too soon to expand the Portland Street Response Program and that we need more time to determine whether the program is working. I will reiterate what I said in my last testimony. We know what works. We know that meeting people with mental illness where they are with support and resources doesn't just lead to better outcomes for them and for the community. It also saves money compared to just cycling those people through a criminal justice system entirely unequipped to serve them. We have decades of experience with programs like Cahoots showing us that there is a better way. After years of watching the city throw more and more funding at a police bureau that over-polices people with mental illness and has been responsible for numerous killings of those people over the past decade, it is difficult to accept that crisis services are being asked to further prove their effectiveness before they can be adequately funded. The bar should not be higher for funding treatment and support to people with mental illness than it is for funding a police bureau that mental health experts, community leaders, and even the U.S. Department of Justice is recognized as fundamentally failing and endangering people with mental illness. After a year of throwing good money after bad, funding the police bureau's ill-conceived war on peaceful protest, including unconscionable amounts spent on munitions, surveillance aircraft, and endless overtime, this council is being given a chance to right the ship and express your own morals through the budget that you pass.
10 seconds.
I urge you to fully fund the citywide expansion of Portland Street Response, and in doing so, tell the people of Portland, that people living with mental illness, that their lives are more important than maintaining the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Annie.
Hi, I'm Annie Capistani. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in Southeast Portland. What do you think of when you imagine yourself in a safe place, in a secure place? You probably imagine a warm, cozy spot with calm and friendly people that love you. Maybe some good food, good books, and beautiful music. Or maybe you imagine a fragrant flower garden or a beach sunset. But I'm sure when you imagine yourself in a safe place, you don't imagine police or guns. You don't imagine security guards or patrol cars, because the police don't make us safe. They show up after crimes are committed. In fact, police make us unsafe because they escalate the situation and they shoot first and ask questions later. Ask Robert Delgado, may he rest in peace. We need a smaller police budget and fewer police. Millions of dollars currently budgeted for the police should be redirected to vital human services that prevent violence and help people succeed and be happy. Also, any funds for the enhanced service district should be eliminated from the budget, and the street response team should be fully funded, including the expansion. The police want us to think that we are unsafe, but it is well documented that half the arrests in Portland are people who live on the street. If we redirect police funds and use them to help those on the street, then the so-called crime rate would drop and arrests would decrease, which would mean we could get rid of unneeded police officers and free up more funds to help people, which would lead to less crime and less of a need for police, and the cycle would continue in a kind of safety spiral. But this is not happening, so I am very, very frustrated, along with thousands of other Portlanders who believe in justice and equity, because city leaders, particularly the police commissioner, are not listening. Too much money is being spent over policing Black and brown lives in a misguided effort to protect rich white lives that aren't even in danger. I pay taxes in this city, and I don't want my tax money guaranteeing full employment for police who beat protesters. I want full employment for Black citizens. Think of it as reparations. Portland has to achieve a lot of white supremacy, discrimination, and hate. Start by cutting the police budget and prioritizing Black and brown lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jenny.
I know.
Hi, my name's Jenny Boyce. I'm a therapist in the community, and I want to thank you all, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners, for hearing your constituents. I recently read a book called My Grandma's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, and I came wanting to encourage each of you, if you haven't already, to read it. It's about the intergenerational trauma that white bodies, Black bodies, and police bodies have experienced. And he has a very clear process for what happens that allows for so many, especially people of color and Black bodies, to be killed at this point by police, and how to possibly remedy that. And so I'm gonna just kind of use his words. First, he suggested that we all just take 10 seconds together and take some deep breaths and maybe even just hum. So I'm going to allow for that 10 seconds. I have a little timer. So if I'm going to certainly take a deep breath and just settle my system. And so I'm reading from a part of his book that is around police and how to, I'm actually for abolition eventually, but I know there's a lot of steps that need to happen before that can happen. And so here are some of his ideas. He talks about how most police training is tactical. It teaches people when to attempt to de-escalate a conflict, when to draw a gun, when to shoot, etc. And that this training is necessary, but not sufficient. Police need skills to slow themselves down, be present, pay attention, and exercise discernment. They need practice in unthawing themselves from a freeze response without going into a flight or annihilate response. They need practices to help their nervous system settle so they don't plunge unnecessarily into lizard brain reaction. Most of all, public service professionals need experience being with the people they serve and protect. And then, so thank you.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Vivian Lyon, Cody Mcgraw, and Heather Spencer. We will start with Vivian.
Thank you. My name is Vivian Lyon. I am an attorney representing tenants and small businesses in Portland, and I'm on the Rental Services Commission. I would like to read from the prefatory remarks to the Portland Police requested budget, which consists of references to a 2019 survey of Portlanders as a justification for the requested budget. Quote, according to respondents, homelessness was perceived as the top challenge facing Portland, and all 88% of citywide respondents were dissatisfied with the city's response to homelessness. The police do not do a good job of handling the issues related to houselessness, nor do they address the actual concerns and needs of unhoused people. Portland Street Response, as you've heard many times tonight, is a far more appropriate means of addressing the crises faced by people living on the streets. PPB really has no role to play here and should no longer receive funding for it, especially considering that 2 weeks ago in Lentz Park, an officer shot and killed an unhoused man who had a history of mental illness. Rest in peace, Robert Delgado. Quote, the third most cited budget priority varied according to race and ethnicity. White respondents chose police services. However, Asian, Black, and Hispanic respondents selected economic development above police service. This section says it all, doesn't it? White people feel safer with more police. No one else does, given the havoc they wreak on vulnerable populations. The police budget should be vastly reduced and reallocated to programs and departments that will directly support economic development, focusing on small businesses and entrepreneurs, as well as other programs like Portland Street Response that actually increase community safety. We need to seriously reevaluate whether PPB is offering any benefits to anyone other than white, rich Portlanders. Given the events of the past year, the answer is clearly no. Finally, Alicia Lauer is right. You need to stop saying clean up Portland. I'm talking to you, Mr. Wheeler, and your functionary, Sam Adams. Portland's problems are not cosmetic. They go deep. You need to stop pretending that graffiti, the blight on Portland. The blight is called white supremacy as supported and exemplified by your police. Defund the police. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cody.
Good evening again to everyone. My name is Cody Mcgraw. My wife and I live in Portland, and I work for the nonprofit Street Roots. Today, I received a phone call from Tina Delgado, and Tina talked about the pain she is living due to losing her brother, Robert, who was shot and killed by a Portland police officer last April. I asked Tina, what do you think your brother needed in lieu of a police response? She said to not feel threatened. There are a lot of people who are houseless like my brother, and people who are already on the edge from living outside. When they see a gun, when they see officers approaching them, they become fearful and they feel the need to defend themselves. Police responded to Robert's distress in Lentz, the neighborhood of the Portland Street Response pilot. His homelessness, his mental health struggles, his fear of the police all seemed like a situation in which Portland Street Response could have successfully deployed. So City Council, tonight, this isn't a request to defund the police. Many of us are asking you to not defund a program that would have most likely saved Robert's life. Let me close by sharing why Tina called me earlier today. She wanted to make sure she successfully set up a monthly donation to Street Roots, donating all that she could, despite her painful circumstances, because of how Street Roots was clear about who Robert was and what we are advocating for. Time is of the essence, and the words of Kaya Sand's testimony earlier seize this historic opportunity. Please fully fund and support Portland Street Response. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Heather. Heather? Are you there, Heather? You are unmuted, Heather.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm so sorry about that. I just wanted to thank you guys for hearing everyone out. I was expecting not everyone to get a chance to testify, and I appreciate your willingness to stay and hear us. I do want to say budgets are moral documents, and they tell us where our city's priorities are. This budget says that we prioritize the city's brand and not its people. We need to fully fund the Portland Street Response team, as you've heard many times, and expand it citywide. We need to cut the police budget and reallocate those funds towards things that actually help make our city safer, such as better housing options so people have a safe place to sleep, places to be fed, to get clean, widely available hygiene stations, and trash pickup for our houseless neighbors. The protests that have been going on are not going to stop until meaningful reform takes place in our policing and in our priorities. While Mayor Wheeler and the others have had a lot to say about the windows, I've heard nothing from them about the right-wing violence and hate in the city. The message in this budget is clear that we will continue to prioritize property and businesses over actual people. It's shocking to me that you don't see that failure to take any action about the reason behind the protests is why they continue. People do not put themselves in the position to be tear gassed, beaten, and arrested because they're bored. I know you've heard a lot from constituents that are worried about the changes Portland has seen, the boarded up windows, the tents, and graffiti. Those things make me sad too, but for apparently different reasons. What I see is the human suffering that has given rise to them. What Mayor Wheeler sees is damage to the city's brand. The funny thing is, if you address this suffering, the brand will also benefit. I don't understand the resistance to addressing the actual problems instead of just the symptoms. The community is trying to tell you that things need to change, and this budget is a reflection of continued inaction and indifference. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Aisha Musa, Dana Buell, and Ruth Ann Barrett. We will start with Aisha.
Thank you for having me this evening. Thank you for listening to us. I will add my voice to the discussion of Portland Street Response. As we're all aware, Portland is in the midst of a dire humanitarian crisis on our streets. There is no way to understate it. And the crisis is having devastating effects on all aspects of life and business in the city. So if you care about the city's brand, as you've just been accused of doing, and I tend to agree, having watched this for several years, the increasing severity, it's going to kill the brand. The increasing severity of the crisis requires the kind of nonviolent de-escalation approaches offered by Portland Street Response. And the proposed funding in this budget is woefully inadequate for Portland Street Response to meet that need. Now is not the time for hesitance and half steps. I urge you to keep Portland Street Response in the Portland Fire and Rescue and give Portland Fire and Rescue the $4.2 million they have requested to expand the Portland Street Response this budget year. We have to address, as the last person just said, the causes of this problem. And the biggest cause is that we are not looking at our citizens who are living on the street as human beings. They are human beings. We need to look at them as human beings, and we really need to deal with these issues. But Portland Street Response is something we can do in the immediate budget year, and I urge you to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dana.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. My name is Dana Buell, and I serve as the Director of Social Justice at First Unitarian Church of Portland, and I'm also a resident of Southeast Portland. I'm going to keep my comments really short. I urge our City Council to amend the Mayor's proposed budget to fully fund Portland Street Response for this next year and to keep PSR operating under Portland Fire and Rescue. I believe that Portland Street Response provides an opportunity for the City of Portland to not only make a real change in how public safety is enacted, but the public has also proclaimed loudly, as we keep hearing tonight and clearly, that we want alternatives to policing and systems of incarceration for community members who are unhoused and unwell. As evidenced by the recent police killing of Robert Delgado Jr., may he rest in peace, the sooner we implement the crisis intervention system staffed by people more skilled in addressing mental health crises, the better. I also urge, I'm hoping for this, working for this as well, because I think that the people doing that primary work, if we can fully staff the 6 vans with well-trained people, that they should be getting living wages to help keep the program strong. So please fully fund the police response in this budget, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Ruth Ann.
Hi, I'm Ruth Ann Barrett, also known as PDX Downtowner, and I'm sorry about the noise in the background. It's fire department, thank God. But the 2 speakers before me really said all, as far as I'm concerned, there is to say, especially Aisha, because I know her. She's lived in the same building I did. And I said I did because I moved out of Old Town just before COVID. But for 6 years, I sat on the corner of Northwest 4th and Flanders on the 2nd floor, so I had a perfect view. And I witnessed, 3, 4 persons who were in distress. I actually got good at being able to explain to the 911 people what that distress was. It took a little training, but I got there. And I thought maybe I should do a play someday about this, because they walked into my window frame and walked out, and making, of course, finding them, more difficult when you put in the call. So the process was really sketchy, but what most heartbreaking was the level of distress in these people. And I thought, what do I know? I thought that Portland Street, and I call it Portland Street Rescue, because that's what it is. was in fact going to be in Old Town. I mean, why not? Where else would you be? On the other hand, I was wrong. So, okay, maybe I didn't know something that I needed to know that would have picked lengths of 21,000 people versus Old Town of 3,300 people and the density.
10 seconds.
But needless to say, you need to fund it. No ifs, ands, or buts. You did the pilot.
Time.
Will work. Fund it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Carmen G. Castro, Eva Vega, and Vanessa Grant Coates. We will start with Carmen.
Good evening. Buenas noches. This is Carmen Castro. I'm the Executive Director for the Hispanic Chamber. Good evening again, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. Glad to be here. I am here tonight to advocate for the proposed $700,000 one-time budget that will support the minority chambers. And here's why. For instance, the Hispanic Chamber has been advocating for the Latino community since 1993. The Chamber has been providing scholarships for Latino students, leadership training for Latino professionals, and technical assistance for Latino small businesses. During COVID, we did even more. We dispersed funds to small businesses, provided PPE. We helped a great number of businesses fill out forms for grants and loans. And currently we're on pace to complete our work of building over 150 websites for Latino small businesses who did not have a presence in the current world that we're in, where everything is digital, or a lot of it is. We also provided bookkeeping services for others and help others do their taxes. We made all these small businesses visible to the community in general, which helps the businesses keep their doors open. So outside of our general work, we are a gathering place for businesses. We're a place to nurture these businesses, and we advocate for them. We are constantly looking to see what we can do and what works in the immediate matter of time to help them survive and thrive. So this is why the current budget that we have requires also that we are constantly looking for funds. And we have also been asked to serve in a variety of committees to represent our community. This budget, this proposed budget, would really help us do our work instead of diverting us to look for funds, which we can do, but it'd be more useful for the community if we actually were engaged in the work. And that is why—
Your time has concluded.
Okay, I urge you to support the proposed budget for the minority chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Eva.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Eva Vega. I am here today to advocate on behalf of divesting funds from the Portland Police Bureau and reinvesting them into our community. I come to you as a lifelong resident born and raised in North Portland. I've lived here for 39 years. I serve as a high school administrator for Rosemary Anderson High School in the New Columbia campus. I grew up the daughter of an immigrant, very impoverished with housing and food vulnerabilities. I was, gang affected in the streets, and so on. And so I'm here to appeal to you because I work with students who are also disproportionately affected by socioeconomic and racial hardships. And I've saw this influx of housing and food vulnerability, but more importantly, gun violence within the community. I serve several students who feel that they need to arm themselves. Our community has lost several students since since protests began last year. I've also served on the front lines of protests to use my voice and advocate for the allocation of funds toward community-based organizations who serve individuals who are most disproportionately affected by abuse of power and systemic oppression. I am coming to you today to ask you to reconsider your allocation of funds and to invest in organizations like Rosemary Anderson High School and others who are committed to doing the hard work, who are committed to creating meaningful and sustainable lifelong changes. I say that as a former student of Rosemary Anderson High School. They changed my life. That school changed the direction of my life, and I have been able to do the same for many of my other students. We serve 70% roughly African American and Black families and 20% Latino. I'm here to tell you right now that if these funds are not allocated, that we are going to see the perpetuating violence, gun violence, property crime. Do not invest in property, invest in people, please.
Thank you. Next, we have Vanessa.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Grant Coates. I'm a Northeast Portland resident and a domestic violence survivor. I'm going to share a vulnerable piece of my story to highlight the overwhelming need for defunding police budgets and investing into community organizations that center and care for victims and survivors of domestic violence. On a spring night in 2018, I was assaulted in a seemingly empty parking lot. The event lasted about 15 minutes before we got back into the car and entered onto the highway. About 5 minutes later, we were pulled over by 2 police cars. I was still in fight or flight mode, and when 2 white police officers asked me to get out of the vehicle and follow them, I did so without question. One of the officers disclosed that a bystander had called and reported that I was being assaulted. The officer then asked if I had been assaulted by the man in the car. When 3 white police officers had 2 Black people pulled over, the only thing that I knew would keep us safe was to lie. I told the officer that I had to use the restroom and most places were closed, so we pulled over. The response I received was appalling. You think you can use my road as a bathroom. You know I can write you a ticket. Next time, wait until you can find an actual restroom. And then he told me that I could go. Imagine being a victim of intimate partner violence only to be met with more dehumanization from a system and organization that uses the motto, protect and serve. Had I told the truth, the only result would be another Black man murdered or incarcerated. For many BIPOC people experiencing domestic violence, calling the police is just as dangerous as the situation that they are in. I can only imagine what would have happened if this scenario had been met with people who were trained and skilled in addressing domestic violence, people who would have treated me with empathy and trauma-informed care rather than punitive measures. People who are subjected to power and control on a regular basis should not have to have similar experiences from law enforcement during crisis. I'm not asking for law enforcement to have more training. I'm demanding that the City of Portland prioritize community members and their needs. Defunding the police and redistributing to organizations and people who already have the skills and training and who interact with the community in culture-responsive, nonviolent approaches. Invest in communities. Invest in victims and survivors who find safety and solace through domestic violence resources that are grossly underfunded. Invest in me. I'm demanding that the City of Portland immediately defund from the Police Bureau and invest into programs that will truly create safer communities. We have been shown time and time again that providing more funding for police does not create a better police force. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 3 people to testify will be Heather Gardner, Christine Longmuir, and Emery Mort. We will start with Heather.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. I'm Heather Gardner. I too am a domestic violence survivor who was also failed by the police. I'm calling on you to fully fund PSR with the $4.2 million they need. Why are you still overfunding PPP and taking money away from resources the community actually needs? This budget gives $5.3 million in city dollars to support the accelerated hiring of 30 patrol officers. We have been calling on you to defund PPP by 50% at least for the past year, and we continue to be ignored. Since 50% of all arrests are of houseless people, it's a pretty reasonable request. After PPP responded to a call that PSR should have been allowed to take and Robert Delgado was murdered, it just feels like a slap in the face to not even bother to fund Portland Street Response in your budget. We have the most brutal police force in the country by over 600% and the 5th most racist police department in the country. The status quo is not acceptable and we will not accept it anymore. Please, I'm begging you to stop letting PPP get away with murder and make the changes that we demand. Police do not make our community safer. Invest in groups like PSR that actually do. I'm calling on you to fully fund the citywide expansion of PSR. And while I have you here, I want to urge you, Mayor Wheeler, to step down as police commissioner. It is clear that you have put our community at risk with your violent rhetoric, and it is a gross conflict of interest for you to continue to hold that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Christine.
Thank you. I will keep it short. I would just like to reiterate Liz Smith and Joy Church's support of the Venture Portland $530,000, and then also the $700,000 to the BIPOC chambers. As a small business, I have found Venture Portland amazing. The support that they gave us through COVID and continue to give us has just been, I don't know what I would do without it. So thank you. I also would like to say that Mayor Wheeler, I think the tables that you put together with Sam Adams are doing amazing work. And I think it's a good direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Emery.
Hi, for the record, my name is Emery Mort, resident in the city. I organize with Portland Metro People's Coalition on policy like police accountability and justice system reform. I want to start off by saying I want to see the freeing up of Portland Street Response's full allocation of $4.8 million in funds. I want to see the pilot program's full expansion as intended, citywide, 24/7. I want to see these workers come in and do a great job around the city, working for a living wage. Like Kaya said, the nation is watching. In the mayor's proposed budget, we're seeing $3 million for graffiti removal or $5.3 million for accelerated hiring of 30 police employees. I really question why street response would be shortchanged for expenditures like that. I hope this initial framing of the debate is amended. With the PPB budget, I recognize a slight budget decrease from what they hoped for. We've all seen the PPB itself as a huge voice in media and City Hall in determining the bounds of the debate. Likewise with downtown business, they're in the meetings, they're setting the definition of what's possible to a significant extent. And contrast that with people who are going unseen, people on the front lines of economic oppression, racism, being under the pressure of gun violence and disinvestment. They're seeing these types of expenditures like $200 million on PPB and know how far that money would go to stabilize situations for people in distress. So I think this initial budget is the standard way of doing things. And to everyone out there, we have to keep striving for a much more effective system. For so many people here, when options are framed openly to them, they're responsive, like Portland Street Response. People support street response being on the call, so fund them. We need to see leadership in structurally enacting this popular will. And I think we're seeing in this last couple fights over like spending on gun violence and the budget, that we really need boldness in setting a different standard for what's normal in terms of how we build and fund a thriving society out of our history and struggles. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Jake Doctor, Morgan McNiff, and Scott Kerman. We will start with Jake.
Hi, just want to confirm that y'all can hear me.
We can.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I want to appreciate everybody who's here listening, giving time to hearing from the community. I want to be cognizant of the fact that the community has been speaking for years. This is not a new conversation. And even this summer, when we had 10,000 people on the Burnside Bridge demanding that we defund Portland police and demanding police accountability, we haven't seen that. And then weeks and months later, when we had council meetings about funding, Commissioner Hardesty mentioned that there was a record number of communication to her and to Commissioner Udaley and to many others. And people were still not heard. And we are still here and we are still speaking. And our leaders like Commissioner Ryan, who ran on a commitment to defunding the police. And then later, those words were mysteriously stricken from his website. Didn't follow through on that. And when we had Mayor Wheeler, the Commissioner of Police, making commitments to defunding and police accountability, we haven't seen that. So we've regularly been asking. People have been regularly showing up. We've had countless listening sessions. PPB's been having listening sessions since the 90s, committing to reducing racial profiling, but then Gun Violence Reduction Team continued that even after they made commitments that weren't followed through on. And the community is regularly asked, what are we going to fund instead? But the community has never been asked and given chance to say, why are we funding Portland Police Bureau, who in 2019 only solved 12% of rapes, who regularly solved 20 points below national averages for assaults and homicides. And even the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force themselves had an average clearance rate of around 20%, meaning that 80% of crimes that they were supposed to be solving were unsolved. And so I ask, why are we funding something that has been a regular failure? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Morgan.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
My name is Morgan, and over the last year, I've been operating the nonprofit Team Raccoon PDX. We do a few things, but our main focus is chemical weapons accountability and their impact on our environment. We are currently facilitating a public study of chemical analysis of chemical weapon use sites, such as the downtown parks, Lounsdale and Chapman Square, and the Portland Public School K-8 Cottonwood School. We also equip everyday people with PPE to protect against chemical weapons in their home. I'm going to restate that so it really sinks in. We are running a chemical weapons analysis on public school playground because of heavy metal contamination and providing PPE to people in their own homes because of chemical weapon use in this city. Commissioners, these are war crimes in the settings of war, but our police are allowed to behave this way in a time of peace. That is morally unjust. We hold these sessions, but I feel like the city council does not really hear us. You didn't hear a mother named Althea open her window and screaming, "You don't have to use the gas. Our babies sleep here. They don't have the mask." Her cries will never leave me. Nor do you hear Elijah Warren, whose son was screaming in pain and desperately trying to wash chemical weapons out of his eyes. Cops gave him a concussion in his front yard and refused to tell him which officer did it. Nor the Walker family, whose children one commissioner here has met personally. Their twins have BARDA systems, pressure-positive hoods sized for toddlers, so they no longer have to hide in their bathroom when police use chemical weapons and it seeps into their home. I didn't have a solution for their infant, and that sits with me every day. All of these families have been supplied with respirators for their children by us, but they shouldn't have had to. And those are only the ones who are brave enough to put their names out there. Even if children didn't get gassed in their home, some have to worry about contamination at their public school. The Cottonwood School playground is currently closed because it is contaminated with a deadly level of heavy metals from chemical weapons, and that children will get sick and die if they play on it. This was confirmed by chemical analysis facilitated by our group, not by any help or urgency on the matter from the city. Ban chemical weapons, defund and abolish our racist police, and put that money back into the communities who have been gassed in their homes to ensure it will never end. Finally, War Crimes Wheeler needs to resign. Rest in power Kendra James, who was murdered by Portland police on this day 18 years ago.
Thank you. Next, we have Scott.
Good evening, Mayor Wheeler, commissioners. This is Scott Kerman, Executive Director of Blanchet House. I'm here to advocate for greater funding for the Portland Street Response Program so that it can expand to other locations in the city. I support the heartfelt and informed testimony provided earlier by my friend from Street Roots, Kaya Sand, and I won't repeat her excellent points or the other points made by advocates for Portland Street Response here tonight. Instead, I'll repeat a question I am asked almost every day. When will Blanchet House be able to serve its meals indoors again? Serving meals indoors will be an important step in rehumanizing the experiences of the people we serve, people who are suffering tremendously. Of course, when it comes to reopening indoor dining, there's the logistical COVID hurdle of having 75 diners and volunteers in our dining hall. But the more significant challenge we face for indoor service is the mental health and addiction needs of our meal guests, which have been greatly exacerbated by the pandemic. We address numerous crises outside of our facility all day, each day. Safely and effectively serving guests in crisis will be significantly more difficult indoors and will pose greater risk to other meal guests and volunteers as well as the guests in crisis. In our opinion, having trauma-informed crisis and de-escalation support from Portland Street Response seems an essential element of our ability to safely serve meals indoors again. I expect other human services agencies eager to welcome clients indoors again would agree. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Lenore Zanger, Ashley Schofield, and Brandon Farley. We will start with Lenore.
Hello, Mayor, Council. Thank you for hearing me out tonight. I am just an average citizen of Portland who is here to say that when we're sitting around with our friends and our families and our neighbors, we notice what's going on. And we want the Portland Street Response to be fully funded out of the Portland Police Bureau. People have asked a rhetorical question a lot tonight. I guess it's rhetorical. They're like, why can't we get this going? When I have analyzed the situation, I sometimes come to the conclusion that the Portland Police Association and the Portland Police Bureau wag the dog of our city. And I would like to see it be the other way around. So please assert your supremacy in making the voice of your citizens heard. We cannot take on the entrenched powers of the union and the police bureau without you leading. And the people are still waiting here to see some action. Please work towards moving money to community funding. Please fully fund the police, the street response. The average person in Portland wants to see those given priority. We really do. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Ashley.
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you for this time this evening. I'm here tonight as a mother, a community volunteer, an active neighborhood emergency team member, a homeowner, and an activist. I'm here to echo much of what my fellow neighbors and comrades have already testified. Your budget cut for the Portland Police Bureau of only 1.4% is not nearly enough. Furthermore, you continue to not invest enough in a very publicly supported initiative through the Portland Street Response. We want to see that program funded more than the PPP, as we all have been screaming at you for months and years that the Portland Police do not protect us. They do not prevent crime. They do not solve crime. They are murderers. In fact, the Department of Justice is threatening to come back to the city to actually reprimand them because the PPP has never had an ounce of accountability for their abusive historical past. They are not only dangerous, they are incompetent, but you, Mayor Wheeler, refuse to talk about that. Mayor Wheeler wants to think that our biggest threats are broken windows and graffiti downtown, but use as an excuse not to engage in this conversation about radicalizing how we implement true public safety. It is disingenuous to condemn property destruction while ignoring the relentless violence of the Portland police, who have used force documented 6,000 times last year alone against citizens expressing their opinions on the value of Black lives in the city. We need change in our public city system that includes taking care of our most vulnerable with compassionate and resourceful tools, and one that includes reparations so we can heal our city from historically racist and separatist past. We want real change and no more of your empty words. By radical change, I mean we need to turn our police precincts into shelters and police cruisers into mental health vans. We have the people, the resources, and the spirit in the city to truly radicalize public safety and to make it not only equitable, but more important, effective. How we will do that is taking care of our city's most vulnerable and allocating reparations to underserved and targeted communities. One last thing, please think about the Black Lives Matter signs that you see propping around the city, and wonder to yourself, commissioners, what that means.
Thank you. Next, we have Brandon.
Hello, I'm Brandon Farley. I'm a Northwest Portland resident, and I hear a lot of support for the Portland Street Response pilot program, but as far as what I've seen, the statistics, the data have shown that it's been largely ineffective, responding to an average of 2 calls per day. I think they tweet more times per day than that with a team of 5 working 8 hours a day, working since February. to me seems like they're providing no results. And I don't know why, Ted Wheeler, you're wanting to invest another $1 million in this pilot program that seemed to have been dead on arrival. I mean, they've had 2 years or more to prepare and millions of dollars already. And what I see so far is just a few photo ops, a couple of interviews, and it looks more like Joanne Hardesty's campaign re-election office. It's just making her look good, but not actually doing anything good for the community. And I'm speaking as someone who was homeless in Portland on the streets for 7 years. And if I would have seen one of these 5 social workers come up to me, not having the lived experience, not knowing my language, I don't think I would respond too happily to them and think that they would provide any benefit. So I think you should take the money out of that and refund it into the fire department. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 3 speakers will be Jessica Rojas, Deborah Rochford, and Jamila Rashid. We will start with Jessica.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me this time to testify. I'm just here on behalf of my staff at the Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods. We all sent you a letter recently just to express our concern and support for the funding of the Portland Street Response Pilot. From my understanding, there are funds dedicated to this program that are not being fully accessed. And we want to ensure that the funding to the fullest extent can happen for this highly needed program. We'd like to stress that the need to fund beyond that amount is currently dedicated is really needed because there are other parts of the city that are waiting to access this program. And we believe if implemented, it could save lives and improve the safety and livability conditions for those most in need. And we also want to express the importance of this program staying in the care of the city. The workers who will be doing this work, similar to police and other public servants, are being held to the highest standard when employed by city government. And it's important that not only for ensuring livable wages, that those who are working in the sector, but for those who receive the services, that we know that the employees are being held to a standard of public service, and they're on equal terms and footing as police and firefighters. And I'll just say that we know that people who work in the private prison sector, they're more likely to engage in extracurricular, crimes to help make money when they're not paid fully at par with public funded facilities. So just want to thank you for funding the pilot and encourage your support for funding it even more. We look forward to seeing those services in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Deborah.
Hello, and thank you for your time. My name is Deborah Rochford. I'm a business owner with a background in nonprofit development, events, and fundraising. I'm also a district organizer through the Catalytic Investment Initiative for Venture Portland. I have worked with and for several of the business districts, including Kenton, Belmont, Northeast Broadway, and currently the Williams District. As Joy mentioned earlier, the businesses in a district often rely on volunteer-run business associations to organize and support the economic development of their area. These volunteer boards plan and produce events because they've been shown to increase revenue, bring people in to explore and discover businesses, and unite the businesses and neighborhood communities. Producing events takes time and money. Associations that can afford to pay a staffer or pay for an event planner are the ones who are able to produce the larger scale events that in turn have a large impact on their businesses. To have events that benefit districts the most, volunteer boards need support and guidance. It can be daunting and confusing for volunteers with little to no experience to have to navigate things like sponsorships, vendors, permitting, and road closures. Venture Portland is a hub for the districts we work with, gathering volunteers and staffers for them to collaborate and learn from each other, supporting events with organizing, planning, promoting, and even running day of event itself. As we continue to navigate through a COVID world, we will continue to have to pivot, rethink, and create new ways to bring the community together, new ways to give businesses a boost. I'm asking you today to please consider the one-time additional monetary support for Venture Portland. This will go far in providing a more even playing field among districts, give associations a place to turn to when they need support and guidance, and most importantly, give businesses the exposure and community connection they need to survive. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Jamila.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Good evening, Mayor Wheeler and members of the City Council. My name is Jamila Rashid. My pronouns are she and her and hers. I'm an organizer with Unite Oregon, but I'm coming to you as a concerned parent that doesn't support the police being in the schools. My experience with police being in the high school that I attended was very traumatic for me, and still to this day, when I see the police, my anxiety kicks in and I get very nervous, even though I'm not doing anything wrong. I was trying to hurry up to get to my class so that I wouldn't be late, but little did I know there was an altercation taking place and the police grabbed me thinking that I had something to do with it. I tried to explain that I had nothing to do with what was going on. I was just trying to get to class with a hall pass in my hand. The police have a bad reputation when dealing with BIPOC folks. It would also be a traumatic experience for BIPOC students knowing the police has a bad reputation of abusing and killing us in situations that do not call for force. Instead, we need the money to go into the schools for ethnic counselors so that the students can identify with, as well as ethnic mental health professionals and reparations. It's time for you to take a stand and make a strong positive change with the BIPOC community that will actually help us and make a big difference in our lives and also save our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Barbara Ross, Fiona Burgess, and Elena W. We will start with Barbara. Barbara? Looks like you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. And I want to first thank the commissioners for their patience and listening to the voices of the community. I think that's a real service to the community, and it also lets you hear people's sincere feelings, their anguish, and their anxiety about what's going on. First of all, I want to say that I'm speaking as an individual, not representing any organization. I want to support all the past eloquent things that have been said in support of the street response teams, and I would fully support the expansion of that citywide. I understand that you need training and you need time to do that in a thoughtful and effective way. You can't just dump people on the streets and expect them to be able to do their task without the right preparation, organization, and leadership. But I think that it's really important that we take this opportunity to provide a different kind of service to our community. The other program that's important in the same way is the public safety support specialists that are doing organizational and administrative jobs that don't require a sworn officer with a gun. These are clerical tasks that can effectively be carried out by citizens who are trained to do that specific job. In addition, we know that the PCCEP is exploring all kinds of tasks that could be undertaken by other people, that don't require an officer who's been away 6 months trained on things that an officer needs to know. I do not agree with the demonization of our police force. I believe that we have many honorable officers with a lot of integrity who are trying to do their job in a very thoughtful way. I think we need a balance in terms of supporting our police at the same time that we look for alternatives that don't cost and that we will save money in the long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Fiona.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Good evening. My name is Fiona Burgess. I live in Southwest Portland. For the sake of keeping things short, I'll focus on Portland street response tonight. My written testimony will cover more. I think Mayor Wheeler might need to be reminded that the demand for a non-police crisis response program has existed in our community before June 2020. In fact, the use of 911 to bring police into situations that should not involve them has been a concern among progressive policymakers since 911 was first established in 1968. Portlanders have been calling for something like Portland Street Response since Cahoots first got off the ground in Eugene, if not earlier, and I'm eager to see their work expand into my own neighborhood. But now, all of a sudden, we need to wait until evaluation report comes out. Never mind the years of stories proving the danger that Portland police bring to mental health crises, to the point where even the U.S. Department of Justice has called them out. Now it's a question of whether and how to fund temporary positions to push forward the solution our community has been asking for years. The evaluation process for PSR is not an end-of-term report card. It's a process which has been running concurrently with the pilot and which has informed PSR on how to move forward with their program. Greg Townley from PSU's Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative, which is running the evaluation, has stated that it's intended to determine how to scale up, not whether to scale up. And these goals will be hindered by the piddling amount of funding for PSR you've currently proposed. And please don't give me your line about redirecting police officers into community-based programs. The Portland police have proven themselves to be a danger to our community. Their community programs have long been known to facilitate surveillance of Black communities, and their PPA cannot enforce its bargaining rights over a program they have no involvement in. If City Hall is truly concerned with reimagining public safety, you must let go of your attachment to those who have proven to be a public menace. Also, can we
10
stop?
seconds.
So-called enhanced service districts are about anything besides chasing around homeless people. In the 2 years I worked in one of those districts, all they gave me to ensure my safety was a commuter bus pass that didn't even last me the whole year and a shuttle service that didn't even take me home. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Elena.
Good evening. My name is Elena. I'm a resident of Southeast Portland. I'm a 36-year-old white woman, a recent first-time homeowner. I have a bachelor's in political science and a master's in education, and I work in public education where I've spent the last decade working at the high school level in alternative ed. I want to add my name to the long list of people in our city who have been calling all year long for you to significantly divest funds from PPP and reinvest those funds into our community, and to make the specific request for you to fully fund and guarantee the implementation and expansion of the Portland Street Response to work citywide beyond the current pilot program. Any further meetings should only be a matter of how they can keep improving. We don't need to wait for one more forum to talk about whether or not they will continue. The street response team model is the obvious direction of our future. To say otherwise and leave their existence in question, as done in the current budget proposal, is a complete disregard for what people in this city want, or worse, especially after we saw PPP shoot and kill Robert Delgado at long range and then order and eat pizza while his body lay on the ground next to them at Lentz Park, which is less than 2 miles from my home. Even the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing wrote in their spring draft recommendations on core patrol services that there is widespread support to expand non-police first responders. And we know that feeling isn't exclusive to the city of Portland, but nationwide. I strongly believe that police don't keep us safe, and in fact that they are the greatest purveyors of violence and harm, as well as the greatest barrier for us to begin to make our communities safer. Until we hugely divest from PPP and address root causes of violence with those funds, the reasons people come into contact with the police in the first place, as well as the reasons people think they need them, will continue and will remain stuck in Groundhog's Day. I'm tired of seeing this cycle with no real change. If budgets are a moral document, then what do you really care about? Police or the safety and well-being of Portlanders? Show us in the budget and make it clear. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 3 people to testify will be Sarah Shale, Beatrix Lee, and Jules Boycott. We will start with Sarah.
Hi there. Wow, you took me by surprise. Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I want to recognize the challenging task at hand when there's so much need in this community reflected in this budget. I'm with Brickseed Mortar, which helps Portland's small businesses with visibility, technical assistance, and guidance in the spirit of community over competition so that our small businesses can survive and thrive. This past year has been incredibly challenging, with small businesses burdened with rent obligations, even those who have been shuttered for 14 months. This week alone, our small businesses have been busy with applications to re-up their EIDL, apply for restaurant relief, shuttered venue grants, and in addition to the start and stop of trying to reopen as the governor mandates closures and reopenings that make our small businesses heads spin. The majority of these businesses have seen revenues down over 50%, while many deal with repeated break-ins. However, our small businesses are a resilient and diverse group who make Portland the amazing place where we love to work, play, and visit. Bricks Need Mortar shares support for many of the allocations in the mayor's budget. With the limited time, I will focus on the allocations for Venture Portland and our minority chambers of commerce. I've worked closely with several of our minority chambers to help our most marginalized small businesses to gain urgently needed access to capital and rent relief and deliver much needed technical assistance. So I want to share that, and I'm going to go off script for a bit because of some of the things I've heard tonight. Over the past year, we've seen a poor response of police to our small business property crimes. We hear again and again that PPB is under-resourced. However, I'd like you to reconsider our expectations
10 seconds.
and to reconsider those priorities. I'm going to echo some things that I've heard tonight, which is to invest in people, invest in the arts, and invest in innovative programs that high impact, move the needle, and make Portland the incredible place that we love. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Beatrix.
Confirming you can hear me.
We can.
Yeah, so I would like to add my voice to advocate to expand Portland Street Response and divest in PPB. I want to take a moment to remember that the U.S. spends by far the most military spending in the world by, $2 trillion, followed by China. Third is the U.S. police of 118 billion. So that says something about how much military presence and how over-policed we are. Portland is not excused from that. We spend over 200 million on the police. And as folks have mentioned, budgeting is a moral document. And what that budget says is that we are representing a moral values. And there's just so many reasons why we need to divest from the police. The origins of this institution is literally formed by being slave catchers in North Carolina. So the system itself is racist and used to now still control, arrest, incarcerate, and kill Black people. And it also is what leads to mass incarceration, why 1 in 3 Black men will go to jail in their lifetimes. And we're just so used to this that we think this kind of toxic air is clean if that's all that we know. And I want to remind us that Black citizens make up 28% of Portland Police Bureau's shootings, while Black folks make up only 5.8% of the population. And so when we look at the 911 calls that the police respond to, 95% of those are for nonviolent situations. And so I'm not sure why we're responding with such violent forces. And so there's a lot of calls for reform, but we have the reformed police now, and what we see is just failed responses. So I'm just putting my voice in to divest from PPB and invest in Portland Street Response.
Thank you. Next, we have Jules.
Hello, my name is Jules Boykoff. I'm a resident of Southeast Portland and a professor of political science at Pacific University. I'm here today in full-throated support of Portland Street Response. I urge City Council to fully fund the program and to expand the pilot citywide. Each week, I volunteer at Street Roots, where I work with unhoused and formerly unhoused Portlanders who across the board support the Portland Street Response as an alternative to getting scooped into the criminal legal system. If you are unhoused, unfortunately, there's a good chance that you've had negative interactions with the Portland police. The Portland Street Response is an innovative and much needed move in a different direction. But for the program to succeed, it not only needs the support of the wider community, and it does have that clearly from what we've heard today, but it also needs proper funding. Mayor Wheeler, your proposed budget allotment for Portland Street Response falls far short of what is required. According to an analysis by Street Roots, you're only supporting 23% of what's needed to fund the program. At this crucial stage, abundant funding is required. In fact, underfunding Portland Street Response in this year's budget could actually kneecap the program. In addition to robust funding, Portland Street Response should be run through Portland Fire and Rescue, not only because they have the medical training and infrastructure to expand the program to all of Portland, but also because this is a way to support good public sector jobs. Also, it is important to insulate PSR from efforts of the Portland Police Union to influence the program's scope and evolution. I very much agree with Kaya Sand, the executive director of Street Roots, who wrote in a recent column that, quote, "This is not a time for the mayor and city council to hold back. Half efforts write the script of failure. This is a time to be visionary," end quote. Now is the time for political courage and common sense. This is a clear-cut chance to stake a historical legacy. I urge you to fully fund Portland Street Response so that the program can fly. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three people to testify will be Bryce Britton, James Parker, and Hyung Nam. We will start with Bryce.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. My name is Bryce Britton. I go by he, him, and his, and I am the president of Portland Area Business Association, soon to be called Oregon Pride in Business. We were founded in 1992 and are Oregon's LGBTQ+ Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to Mayor Wheeler and Portland City Council. I support the one-time funding of $700,000 for the minority chambers to increase support for the members and to engage local partners. The LGBTQ+ family is intersectional, and we are part of all communities. This pandemic has devastated our small business community. Multi-generational families run shops are shuttered left and right. As a chamber, we have frozen our membership dues, stalled efforts on coalition building, to focus on simply feeding and clothing the homeless. This funding will allow us to complete our rebrand and relaunch a new website that will include things like an employment page and a directory page to help direct people to LGBTQ+ owned businesses. With this funding, we will be able to start up new programs. One of them like Thrive in Business, which is going to be a scholarship support fund for startups. We're going to start a mentorship program to establish older established businesses with younger, more needed businesses to help them shoot through the hoops. We're going to do a further education program. We're going to start equity and inclusivity training for our members and strengthen our community partners like the Q Center, Pride Northwest, the other minority chambers, and community centers chambers like Business for a Better Portland. This funding will catapult us beyond the current economic disaster. It will change lives. I encourage you to support the funding to help strengthen our minority chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have James.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Good evening. Thank you to Mayor Wheeler and the Portland City Commissioners for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Mayor's proposed budget and specifically the Minority Chamber of Commerce support through ARPA funding intended to build our organizational capacity. My name is James Allen Parker. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Chippewa Cree Tribal Nation, the Executive Director of the Oregon Native American Chamber, and co-chair of the Community Chamber Coalition of Oregon. The Community Chamber Coalition of Oregon was formed in 2020 to unite and amplify the voices of our communities and small businesses. We are a voice for small businesses and entrepreneurs from underserved and under-resourced communities who find themselves struggling to be heard at policy and decision-making tables regarding the economic recovery and the ongoing needs of small businesses. I commend the Mayor's proposed budget for its support of culturally specific chambers of commerce. In order for Portland to build back a more resilient and equitable economy, our organizations need additional capacity as we strive to support our members, our community lifelines, as they recover and grow. At the direction of the Mayor's Office, with the Minority Chamber of Commerce support funding, we will build our organizational capacity to engage and take on leadership roles at advisory tables with the City of Portland, such as the Economic Recovery Task Force and the newly created action tables. Also to communicate and navigate BIPOC-owned businesses to available resources while also providing improved access. And to provide the City of Portland with strategic direction informed by direct engagement with BIPOC-owned businesses with the necessary grounding in equity. Organizational capacity support also allows us to retain staff recently brought on board to implement city and state level relief projects. So finally, I am proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with our governmental and elected leaders as they demonstrate their priorities with budgets that match their words. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Hyung Nam.
Hi, my name is Hyung Nam. I'm with Portland Metro People's Coalition, and I want to also speak in favor of the demands from Unite Oregon to cut $35 million more from the police. Obviously, there are so many other things, many needs that we have, and the police have been completely unaccountable, even according to their own strategic insights report. The community does not trust them. They even internally, they don't even trust accountability for abuse of power. I also have a problem with decisions that are made outside of the budget process and outside of any kind of transparent and democratic process. I discovered through reading the CBO's review of the police budget that over the summer, the 50 there was a formation of a full-time unit for the rapid response team of 50 members instead of a detached on-call unit. That is one of the things that not only led to assaulting of the public during a pandemic and actually harming the public, but also racked up, continue to abuse overtime so that we had some police officers make more than their own salaries just in overtime and make over $200,000 a year assaulting the public. So we need to cut from the police. We need to cut the rapid response team completely. We need to, the criminal intelligence unit is being audited. We need to cut that unit as well, which it does not even appear in the budget and show no metrics. Furthermore, we need to reinvest that money. Of course, we need to fully fund a 24/7 Portland street response throughout the city. And we also need to use a more democratic and transparent process to reallocate funding using participatory budgeting more widely in the city. I also noticed that there is an attempt to fund through the OMF a coordinator for enhanced service districts. The city should not be subsidizing Portland Business Alliance, who have broken lobbying rules, who have a conflict of interest with the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. The next people to testify will be Emily Fox, Demetria Hester, and Dylan Bell. We will start with Emily.
Confirming you can hear me?
We can.
My name is Emily Fox. I'm a citizen of so-called Portland, Oregon. And while I was looking over the budget proposal, my attention was immediately drawn to the police salaries. The thing that caught my eye was that on page 93, the line for full-time police salaries was left blank. I added up the math myself. It was 119 million and some change, and I realized some other things. Most of the full-time police hires are working at or near their salary cap. This was striking to me for two reasons. The first was no other bureau comes close to paying that much. Entry-level firefighters get about $45,000, which, according to Mayor Wheeler at the start of this proposal, isn't enough to live comfortably in the city. But entry-level police, by contrast, take home 61 by default, which is enough. I was hard-pressed to find anyone, regardless of position, hired by the police that made less than 61,000. Meanwhile, the officers of management and finance, which employ the same number of people in many comparable roles like analysts, accountants, and managers, requested only half that amount at about 60 million in their salary. This leads me to my second point. Earlier today was the PPA bargaining meeting where a big theme seemed to be paying officers not to work. They argued it was fine to ignore texts and calls regarding shift changes and call-ins, that they needed days off to compensate for the overtime that they were selling to each other anyway. And paid time off was needed for non-approved trainings. We only have to look at Officer Brent Taylor and his over 40 hours of rifle shooting to see how that time gets spent. In conclusion, if this city needs money, then it needs to stop paying so much of it to an occupying force from outside of the city to loot funds from the city and put that money into meaningful programs that stay in Portland, like the street response program that was recently piloted and needs to be fully funded. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Demetria.
My name is Demetria Hester, a Black queen, a Black Lives Matter activist that was brutally shot 15 times by the police and arrested by the police. You're sitting here, you're so disgusting, Mayor Wheeler. You are the police commissioner and you know you're wrong and you keep perpetuating this same bull crap to us like we're supposed to accept it. Why do you feel like you're going to take $5.3 million again to brutalize us? We're going to still protest. The DOJ is coming because of the things that the police are doing to us. You are the cause. Everybody is shucking and jiving and passing all this money around. You know you're wrong. You are wrong. Y'all are wrong. You need to resign. This money needs to go to the Black and brown community so we can heal of the infliction of white supremacy that you continue to perpetuate every single day, feeling like you're in power because you have no power. We as people have the power, and we're going to show you that we have the power and you don't. This is not going to roll. We're not going to stand for this. This is not going to happen. You are not going to continue to put these police on us and kill us, our children, our people. We're not going to keep letting it happen. We're going to continue to protest until you stop and resign and give your position up to someone who knows what this community needs, instead of keep asking for all of us to come and be victims and tell you over and over again what you're doing, and you know you're wrong and y'all are failures. You are failures and you need to resign. You know that you are wrong. You know that you need to resign. Do us a favor. Resign. Bye.
Thank you. Next, we have Dylan.
Yes, hello?
Hello.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me tonight. I am a newer resident of Portland and have quickly fallen in love with this city, and mostly fallen in love with what people are willing to do to make their voices heard, as it has inspired the rest of the world in ways that I could never have imagined. Unfortunately, this budget has done absolutely nothing to address the greatest social movement that has happened in 50 years. The problem that we face is that we live on a tinderbox. The brutality here has radicalized thousands, and the taste of victory in the streets has emboldened them. Direct results have been born of direct action. Military police have exhausted their ammunition on some nights and retreated in fear. Protesters have been physically de-arrested. A neighborhood was blockaded, and that ended with apologies from the mayor and Chief Lavelle. Dozens of American cities fought their police because of what Portland showed was possible. Several nations marched in solidarity with us. The anarchist army YPG that defeated the Islamic State in the Levant applauded what we did. While I agree that random destruction does not necessarily further our cause, it does maintain momentum so that the next time the tinder ignites, there will be an immediate resurgence of focused activity. All of this is to say that the paradigm has shifted and there must be a different approach. The doubling down of oppressive tactics will fail. You've done nothing to satisfy these people. To keep the peace, you will have to compromise. You have to strive to meet our basic needs. Why not try and meet the people partway? We want a thriving economy for the average people just like you. What will attract business and tourism is no houseless on the streets, not having a population that is restless and ready to violently revolt, not having trash and potholes everywhere, not having an unaffordable housing market. So defund PPB, punish the worst of them, fight the PPA, find additional funding from the feds and put it towards social renewal. Preventative solutions are proven and available in abundance across the globe. It can be done. We can all find satisfaction, but not under a government which views suppression as the foundation from which it moves forward. Also, I would like to state that I'm a block away from the vigil for Kendra James, rest in power. I yield my time.
Thank you. The last two people who will share their testimony tonight are Abigail Way and Virginia Wilshire Gordon. We will start with Abigail. Abigail? Abigail, you are on mute. Okay, I'll come back to Abigail after Virginia.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to echo sentiments that have been stated here tonight, that it's very important for our city to recognize that we've been seeing this level of violence for years and years and years from the PPB. And it's very important that we just think about this system and the impacts that it's had on people, and the distrust that has been fostered over time. And when we think about building trust with the community, you have to first be trustworthy. And this commission, and especially Ted Wheeler, unfortunately, you have not been trustworthy. And so it's very important to me to think about this budget. To build trust means to be trustworthy. And so I'm here specifically to, support our new fully funding towards our program that, is the street response program. I see, I think there's maybe some conflicting information about it, but it should be really, expanded across the entire city. And this can be a really great frontline effort for us to, go into communities and not respond with violence, but instead respond to people's needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to go back to Abigail real quick and just see if she's available. Abigail? Okay, looks like they're not available. So that wraps up the testimony queue for this evening. I will turn it back to Jen.
Okay, thank you, Zach, very much. And thank you to all of our participants tonight. I speak for everyone in conveying a deep amount of gratitude for everyone who spoke their testimony tonight and who stayed late to make sure that we could hear everybody. For this section of the meeting, I want to move to our closing comments from council, and I'll start with Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you. First, I'd like to appreciate, again, the City Budget Office for all their work tonight to enable us to listen to the community in our budget process. And I want to especially thank all the community members who've given up their personal time tonight to testify about what matters to you, for sharing your experiences and recommendations about where our investments should go. As a council, early this year, we had clear alignment around making progress on the 3 areas that are essential for Portland. Those are housing and houselessness, economic stabilization, recovery, and community safety. And as we've heard in testimony tonight, whatever your position was, these priorities clearly have stood out again tonight. And there were a lot of important things talked about. And there were a few things that I heard that resonated for me. First, the clear need and support for Portland Street Response to expand and serve more areas in Portland. And that, to quote Kaya Sand, that de-escalation is the language of love. Other things, support for food carts and the restaurant economy investments in neighborhood business districts and the culturally specific minority chambers, the need for a community safety system transformation with more community-based investments, the importance of the arts economy, street art, and investment in artists, and the need for stepped-up investments in trans-Pacific houseless services for dignity and safety. These are just a few of the things. There are many, too many to name. This is my first budget cycle, and listening to all the community testimony this week and week after week has been incredibly valuable and gets to the heart of what's important. And frankly, I wish we had more opportunities to do this learning and listening in person. So I'm going to keep focusing on those urgent things that prioritize our vulnerable communities and that Portlanders have access to the supports and services that they need during this challenging time. I'm also grateful that the federal funds will also help us do more than we would have been able to do as well. I'm also appreciative of my colleagues for working together, and I'm still hopeful that we can produce a city budget together with the needs of our community at the center. So thanks again for everyone who stayed with us tonight.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you for your facilitation. And I really also want to extend my gratitude to the Budget Office for the many hours they put into getting us to this place. I always look forward to these evenings. Sometimes I know my day started with a meeting at 7:30, so it's been a long day. I'm doing my best to take in everything, to articulate what I heard is not going to happen right now. I need to sleep on it. And I'm just grateful that so many people showed up to testify. And we, as a team, are in a team that's focused on our top priorities. And we heard many different messages around those priorities. That's what good government's all about. So as Commissioner Rubio said, we are in a time where we must stay focused on houselessness. And please know that we partner with the county on that. In fact, most of the provider contracts are through the county. So that's a partnership between the city and the county. We also will stay focused on building a community safety system that does include the Portland Street Response. And then third, we're in an economic survival time. And so it was actually heartening to hear from more small businesses than usual in our testimony tonight. So thank you, and thank you for your resilience over the last year. And it's a miracle